Welcome to Sustainable Leadership Live. I'm Lisa Danforth, your host, and today I have the fabulous Janice Shade here from Capital Innovation Lab. Janice, thanks so much for joining us today and just bringing this information and your brilliance to us.
I'm excited to be here and see where this conversation takes us.
All right, before we jump right in, which I'm excited to learn from you, I just want to share with the audience a little bit about why I have you on, what you're going to be sharing about in your experience. So Janice is a systems entrepreneur, a financial innovator, and an author with 30 plus years of experience building brands, businesses, and movements. As founder and executive director of Capital Innovation Lab, Janice leads efforts to catalyze a regenerative capital system of resilient, interconnected local communities. She's also the adjunct professor of sustainable finance and the integrated bottom line at Bard MBA in sustainability. And today we are talking about building a sustainable model for longer lasting systemic change, something that I think almost all of us are on board with or would be on board with. So I say, let's jump right in.
All right, let's go.
Now, in the green room, we were talking about, and I love this angle that you were coming at this from, is permission, giving ourselves permission. Can you talk a little bit about that when we're moving forward?
Yes. And I think of it in terms of giving ourselves and our businesses permission to think more broadly about where we want to go with our business, because it is part of our culture. It has been part of our culture because it's part of what capitalism was designed to be or evolved to be nearly 500 years ago. So profit driven, so focused on maximizing profit. And that's what drives a lot of our business activity today. And it continues to, and is kind of in my opinion, and that of, I think, several others, the source of many of the problems that we see in business and with our capitalist system today, because we are so focused on maximizing profit. And so giving ourselves permission to think beyond that, permission to think about things that we do with our business that might be called inefficient and yet could be some of the most creative and innovative and just more humane ways of running a business. I think we need to give ourselves permission to think about those things and get ourselves off that hamster wheel of profit.
Amen. Right? That bigger, faster, more, all of it is, I think, really getting in the way of, why are we doing this? Why are we shooting for all of this profit? So that we can live a life of sustainability, so we can create an impact. And that when we focus solely on the profit, it leaves so much out of the focus.
Absolutely. And it really drives so much of our decision making on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that I say often, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and over the many years that I've started developing a curriculum that the lab at Capital Innovation Lab is actually in the process of putting out as access to entrepreneurs to think about their capital strategy as they're getting ready to go out and start raising money for their business. Because I often say that if you don't think about where your money is coming from, who it's coming from, what kind of partners are you getting engaged with, and how you structure the relationships of your money, it can drive unintended consequences, sometimes deadly. And that's, I lived that. And it's a big part of what drove the book that I wrote, was that experience of finding out the hard way how certain capital decisions, certain investors, certain types of capital can drive your business in a direction that you might not want it to be. So we need to really give ourselves not only permission, but take the time and think through this.
Pause. Love that. I don't know the name of your book, I'm embarrassed to say.
It's Moving Mountains, The Power of Main Street Americans to Change Our Economy.
Can you talk a little bit more about your lessons? Because I think that's huge, what you just spoke about, just to give us a little bit more insight into your experience and how we can learn from it.
Sure. A lot of what's in the book, it comes from my first experience as an entrepreneur. I had a very traditional career for, almost 15 years of working with large, well-known companies, household names, that kind of thing. And after my second daughter was born, I moved on from that and decided to kind of heed my inner entrepreneur who had been knocking on my brain, trying to come out for many years, I realize now, and started my first company. And, one of the most important lessons that I learned, or kind of batch of lessons that I learned, was how to really think through the structure of the business. I know a lot about launching products. I worked for Procter and Gamble in 7th generation. I know a lot about how to take a product from idea phase through concept and then, all the way out to the shelf and into consumer shopping carts. I know a lot about that. I didn't know a lot about how do you set up the business around it, and especially how do you fund that business. So I learned through this whole experience, this was back in 2008, and I had some ideas around crowdfunding. Crowdfunding wasn't even a term really in wide usage back then. And I just had this was just kind of a gut feel, like, wouldn't this be cool if I could do this? And my lawyer and my financial advisor kind of said, yeah, you can't really do that. So you just go out and get money from angels and venture capital. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, when I was doing this, it was, I launched my first big capital campaign in October of 2008, which was just
not a good year.
No.
I remember that year.
Yeah. We all would like to forget that year, but yeah.
I'm not sure what we learned from it, but
well,
we won't go there. It's okay.
That's a talk for another day. Yeah. What I learned from it, it really took longer for me to raise the money that I needed to. And I ended up bringing on venture capital into the business, which I had never intended to do, certainly not so early stage. And it was through that experience of kind of becoming one of their portfolio companies and learning, what their expectations are. They, kind of the venture capital outlook is, you're going to invest in 10 companies and expect 2 of them to kind of take off and be the unicorns and really make it big. And the other 8, you're kind of expecting them to fail or break even. And in a venture capitalist mind, often breaking even is failure. So, or slow growth, which is what my business was. So if you can call, I had double-digit year-on-year growth.
That's just was impressive.
But it just wasn't enough. It wasn't, they wanted the double digits higher towards 3 digits. And since it wasn't living up to those expectations, they just pulled out and the company died, basically. So a perfectly viable business that had opportunity, that had proven track record, that just needed some additional capital to keep going until it reached that tipping point and was really taking off, was, in my opinion, prematurely it prematurely died. And so that's what really drives so much of what I'm doing today, is to help other entrepreneurs who are creating businesses like the one I was trying to start and run here and I ran it for 5 years. It was making it, trying to align capital in a way that can help drive better long-term outcomes for both the business and for the investors. There are investors out there who really want to support these kinds of businesses.
And it sounds frightening as a 30-year entrepreneur to have so much of your business reliant on what the decision is of someone else. So let's dive into Capital Innovation Lab a little bit and talk about that and talk about the difference in the change. Because I know in the green room and when we were talking before, you talked about, so much of our focus to change is the big problems with big money. Let's talk about Innovation Lab and how people can do things different.
Yeah, that's what I love. And that's, and that kind of gets at the title of my book too, of Moving Mountains. I always had this vision of little ants all getting together to move this big mountain, because that's the idea behind it, is that, we've become kind of, indoctrinated, I suppose, into believing that big change has to come from the top down. It's going to come from government. It's going to come from those with big money. I read a book. I found a book probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, written by Ralph Nader of all people. And the title of it is Only the Super Rich Can Save Us. That's the title.
That's
right?
Really frightening, especially in today's day and age.
Especially. And so the premise of it was, so it was written, he wrote it in 2011. And the premise of it was that, it was kind of, I don't even think you can call it historical fiction because it was more fiction, but using famous people. Warren Buffett is down in the Ninth Ward in New Orleans, touring the damage after Hurricane Katrina. And, a woman there, an older woman, Black woman from the neighborhood, kind of reaches out to him and is like, please save us. Only the super rich can save us. So he takes this to heart. He gathers together, all of his buddies, all of his super rich buddies. And so they set out to save the world. And so this is Ralph Nader's, version of, wouldn't it be great if they would all do this, if they would all come together and figure out how to save us? And of course they all met, like they got together twice a year in some fancy place in Maui,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but of course.
I know. Right. There was one woman on his team. It was Yoko Ono. I was like, where's Oprah? But anyways, I couldn't even finish the book because it just kind of motivated me to really think through. It's like, this is never going to happen. Mm-hmm. They're never going to do these kinds of things. And it's like beautiful to dream about it. But what I'm seeing and what I've been working to is we can get to these answers from the ground up. There's more motivation. There's more flexibility. There's more, and there are starting to be more structures in place to allow that. That's what Capital Innovation Lab is about, is what are the barriers and the gaps that are keeping, citizen investors from investing in their communities, mm-hmm. to help build these stronger communities. It really came out in the pandemic during the shutdown, when a lot of us were worried about many of our local businesses not being able to make it, and people finding their way to me and saying, we're supposed to be getting these stimulus check things. I don't need it. I'm fine. My job's okay. How can I use this to support my business? That to me is such a sign of hope that this is a watershed moment.
Wow. And so very important of bringing it back around of how much is enough, right?
Yes. And that's such a perfect example of it. Exactly. That, here are people who are getting this kind of free money and they're saying, I don't need this. Like, I can put this to better use. And that's what's so exciting to me. And so I think that this is the kind of thinking we need to be doing more of. How much is enough? Mm-hmm. I was thinking about my college age daughter sent me an article that she read for her sociology class. And the idea behind it was that it was a sociology professor had done a study among, 50, I think it was 50 people mostly in the New York area who considered themselves, or as a matter of fact, were wealthy. And they're grappling with their wealth and their kind of guilt and shame around it. Stories of, one woman was saying that she takes the price tags off her clothes before her housekeeper can see how much she spends on her clothes, things like that. And so it sparked this great debate and dialogue with my 19-year-old daughter, which was cool. And one of the things we came to is that, we're not necessarily saying people need to make less money. We're not saying,
exactly.
You don't need to make
not less just enough.
Yeah. And if you have enough to satisfy, the lifestyle that you have and some left over, do some good with it. And don't, a lot of what we talked about is getting out of this mindset, this is important, getting out of this mindset of, I've got to make as much money as possible so I can do as much good as possible. That's
Start small, right? Build small. It is the consistency over time, and add more as you're going. And I love what you're talking about. It's not, how much is enough? I get this so much from my clients, my entrepreneur clients, and colleagues that I speak with, of how much isn't, even though they know that they're sort of there, they're always striving for more. So it kind of comes back to that permission of, taking the white knuckled grip off from the wheel and sit in that sustainability. It's making me think of a book by Lynn Twist, The Soul of Money, which is just a phenomenal book for people to just learn about. I mean, it's not all woo woo by any means, but it's so informational. But we've got a few more minutes. Let's talk about different things, grassroots, from the community, all those things that we were talking about in the green room, so that people can understand, what Janice is talking about is something that I can come and start exploring. How will people know? How can people reach out? Like, what's going on that we can inspire people to say, okay, this is a movement I want to be a part of, whether I'm looking to fund my company or whether I'm looking to fund companies.
Yeah, it's exciting to see, changes in capital markets are happening that are making, the kind of ecosystem that I wanted to have for my business 15 years ago is now starting to become apparent. Crowdfunding, the access to crowdfunding, and the sanctioning of it literally by the federal government through regulation, crowdfunding through the SEC, has really changed a lot. It's created a whole new cadre of citizen investors, or the possibility for people to invest directly into businesses that are meaningful to them. And this is something it's going to take time, and it is kind of mind-boggling. We're talking about a lot in my sustainable finance class. We're just starting to get into this with the students in the class, and one of their assignments is to kind of imagine what's their ideal portfolio. Like, if, this is what I want to be doing with my money, how would I invest it according to my values, and what kinds of securities would you include? And so we're starting to get into these talks of, there's more out there than the New York Stock Exchange. There's more out there than a lot of mutual funds. And not that there's anything wrong with any of those, but there are more.
There are other options.
Yes. And more coming all the time. Like a big thing that I've been working on with a group of people. I helped to start the National Coalition for Community Capital 6 or 7 years ago. And the people that are there are just doing fantastic work, finding new ways to create these avenues for folks in a community to provide capital to businesses in the community and create these capital relationships. This is something I'd like people to really start thinking about, is investing as a relationship. It's not, the purpose of investing not to be to make more money, but the purpose of investing being to make some kind of good thing happen in the world. I didn't use the I word. I didn't say impact. You can use that if you want. I know it's one of those terms that's getting fraught.
Is it really?
But we always come up with a new, like, what's the newest, greatest term? I can't keep up with it. But just think about, like, I want my money to do something good. I want it to do something more than just make more money for me. That's the point I want to leave people with, to ponder.
I think that is a perfect place to wrap it up, even though I would love to continue talking to you for another hour and just sharing all of this, because it fills my soul to be thinking about that. Making money, I think, is important. And why we're doing it, I believe, is even more important, because there's a synergistic quality to all of that. So
yeah.
Janice, thank you. I have a question for you.
Oh.
What one habit or boundary has helped you live and lead a more sustainable life?
Well, we started talking today about permission. And so something that I continue to work on is giving myself permission to, I'm just going to put it very succinctly, permission to read. I have, these are all in play. I often have 3 or 4 books going at a time.
I hear you.
But it's where I get my ideas. It's where I can take quiet time for myself. And I often find that it feels like a guilty pleasure when I'm doing that. I want that feeling of guilty pleasure to go away and just give myself permission to say, this is important to my work. It's important to me. And so go read. So I'm getting better at it.
I'm a huge advocate. I'm a voracious reader, and it brings me joy, and I consider it a part of my business plan.
Yes.
So awesome. Beautiful. Thank you. That's a new one, which I absolutely love. So thank you for bringing that to the table. All right, next week, March 22nd, I have Marie Robinson, who is a superintendent at Katahdin School, and she's going to be talking about leading a sustainable change in public schools. Oh, so very important. I can't wait to hear what she has to say. Again, Marie Robinson on March 22nd, 10 a.m. East Coast, 7 a.m. for you on the Pacific Coast. And we look forward to seeing you there. Janice, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance and all your information. Oh, I forgot to ask, where can people reach out to connect with you?
Oh, easiest way is to just find me on LinkedIn. So,
what's your handle?
It's at Janice Shade. I should have known that. Can look it up real quick. Yeah.
That's okay. People can find, and if you want to look it up, can you give us the website for Capital Innovation Lab?
That is innovatecapital.org.
Okay, fabulous. So be sure to reach out, connect with, and just ask any questions that you have. Janice is a wealth of information and always willing to support anyone out there looking for some support. So did you find your LinkedIn handle?
Yes, it's Janice-Shade.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.